Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Barry Gray in the WMCA studios in New York. In a moment, we're going to join our listeners in Buffalo on WBNY. Tonight's broadcast brought to you by Sauce Arturo, the Whitestone Press, Nat Sherman Cigars and Cigarettes. The Dandy Mattress Company presents the news, Northwest Orient Airlines, the Comer Marcus Company, Zion Kosher Meat Products, Sweet Touchney Tea, Empire Furniture Factories, Fieldston Green Apartments, and Stumer's Bread. And now, once again, Barry Gray on WMCA New York, and as of this instant, we're live on WBNY in Buffalo, another member of the Strauss Broadcasting Group. Tonight, as a matter of fact, in just a moment or two, I'll be talking with Dick Powell, who's reporting from Hollywood via our Strauss beeper phones. Then I'll be talking in the studio to Malcolm X. He is the leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims, and Mr. X early this morning met with Cuba's Fidel Castro here at the Hotel Teresa in New York. I'll be talking with Mr. John A. Murphy, Vice President of the Trade Bank and Trust Company here in New York, and President of the Interfaith Movement Incorporated, and with him Bob Sylvester, old friend and well-known columnist of the New York Daily News. And I'll be talking with Isaac Don Levine here from the Overseas Press Club. He's here to discuss the club's invitation to Nikita Khrushchev. And Mr. Levine is a foremost authority on Soviet strategy. He's an author, a foreign correspondent with first-hand knowledge of Soviet espionage and diplomatic intrigue. That will all begin in about 2 minutes. Just a quick note here. Walter Kirschenbaum, who produces the show, on my behalf has been attempting to get Fidel Castro, Dr. Castro, to come to the WMCA microphones in a live appearance. And today, as Castro left the United Nations and heavily guarded inside and not guarded at all outside, Walter met him and introduced himself. And I have a note here from Walter, who is in the control room. It says, quote, Castro shook my hand warmly and said, sure, I hear plenty about Barry Gray. I like meet him. He wants my friend, no? And we have set a tentative date, although I don't hold out, frankly, much hope. Castro is saying yes to just about everything these days. He's quite right, though, when he says he wants my friend, no. I now his enemy, yes. Now let's spend 2 minutes on these important words in New York and Buffalo, and then I'll be talking to Dick Powell in Hollywood. Nobody knows the secret of food preparation any better than the French and the Italians. And any French or Italian master chef will tell you that to improve the taste of any dish, sauce up the dish with Sauce Arturo, the one sauce with the whole tomato goodness. It's made the slow-simmered, old-fashioned way from fresh, juicy, whole tomatoes, master blended with fresh sliced mushrooms, zingy green peppers, tenderized young onions, and to retain full, fresh flavor, Sauce Arturo is cooked fresh just once, and then fresh packed at once. No wonder Sauce Arturo never tastes thin or looks watery. You can honestly see the costly, luscious jewel, a complete picture of the men, their beliefs, their actions as performed before the pressures of a presidential campaign. This, I believe, is a picture that every voter must have, particularly this year, when your vote is so vital to your future and the future of our country. Now, to obtain your copy, send $1 to Candidates, Box 76, New York 46. That's $1 to Candidates, Box 76, New York 46. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to Hollywood and Dick Powell.
How are you?
Barry, how are you?
I am fine, thank you. Do I address you as Dick Powell or Zane Grey? I congratulate you. You've made a great contribution to television.
Thank you very much. Just call me Dear Old Dick, and that's my dear old name. How are you?
I'm very
nice to talk with you.
It's my pleasure. I thank you. How's June?
Oh, she's fine. She just left about 20 minutes ago to to go out to rehearsal.
I hear that you are a member of the Celebrities for Nixon group.
Well, I'm very proud to be vice chairman of that group.
I've always wanted to meet a man in charge of Vice. Bad joke, huh?
No, not a bad joke at all.
Let me ask you, what are your reasons for being for Richard Nixon?
Well, I'll tell you, because when Richard ran for senator out here, I stumped the whole state with him, and then, of course, when he was vice president, did the same thing twice.
Uh-huh.
And it's only natural that you should follow a leader all the way.
And what of the issues of the campaign? I don't seem to be hearing any. What do you think they are?
Well, I don't think there could be any important issues. It's just one man against another. One man is qualified and the other one isn't.
Have you met Senator Kennedy?
I know him very well.
And what is your opinion of him apart from his political candidacy?
Well, he's a nice, charming man, but I don't think he has the wherewithal to do this big job.
Apart from the political candidates for a moment, what is the reaction that you're getting out there about the United Nations meeting this week?
Of course, we only know what we hear on radio and see in television, and it must be pretty exciting there.
It is very exciting if you can call 3,000 cops in an area of maybe a square mile exciting. There are more cops than representatives, I can tell you that.
I'll tell you one thing, I'd be trying to get a taxi cab in New York right now.
I'm about 5 blocks from the United Nations, and I tell you, Dick, that there are more police per corner on the east side of New York tonight than any time in my memory.
Well, I can imagine that. I've been watching it and reading about it and listening to it.
And, of course, Khrushchev is roughing it up between the Waldorf and the Russian embassy in the United Nations. He's having a terrible time.
Well, you know, when you get a bunch of hoodlums together, they cause a little problem.
You have sized it up perfectly. I like Castro's outfit at the UN today. I don't know whether you saw that on television.
No, I didn't.
I'd like to get the name of his tailor. Dick, again, what do you believe? What do you believe of the polls that Gallup has put together, which show the candidates running neck and neck?
Well, I really think that the longer that Mr. Kennedy talks, and the more he tries to give this country away with promises that he cannot fulfill, the more that Mr. Nixon will keep going up in the polls.
What seems to be the feeling in the motion picture colony?
Well, the motion picture colony out here, outside of a few people, such as, maybe Sammy Davis or Peter Lawford, the people with real integrity out here are for Nixon.
And their reasons, again, the same as yours, I imagine.
Just the right man for the right job.
You've said it in a sentence.
That's the way I feel about it.
I thank you very much, and when you're in New York, I hope I have the pleasure of talking to you in person.
Barry, thank you. It'd be a real pleasure to see you.
I must say this, while I have the opportunity, that on the Zane Grey Theater, I like the story fine, but the best part for me is the 2 minutes that you do in the beginning about the lore of the Old West.
Barry, you know, I'm an old ham, and that's the nicest thing I've ever had said. It's like getting a lot of applause, and, you know, we love it.
I thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Powell reporting from Hollywood. There is no need to state that I do not agree with the political opinions expressed by Dick Powell, but that's not my chore in these particular reports from the Celebrities for Nixon campaign. It's an effort to retain impartiality, at least during these segments of the broadcast, and provide an opportunity for each side to be heard. So much for that. Let me swing now to a very partisan subject like cigarettes, and if Buffalo will just excuse me for about 1 minute, please. The partisanship actually shows up in the tobacco because Nat Sherman at 1400 Broadway, New York, has provided a brand new idea in tobacco, partisan political cigars and cigarettes that come packaged 20 to a box, extra length, extra king-sized, slim and tapered. The box itself a good-looking cigarette, crush-proof in red, white, and blue. Now, one box of cigarettes says, "Win with Dick," or "I'm with Nixon." The others, "Let's back Jack." Be you Democrat or Republican, try Nat Sherman's political cigarettes marked each and every one, with candidates and slogans on the box in red, white, and blue. They're great for political get-togethers, parties, and personal use. 60 cents the box, $6 the carton, and worth it. Nat Sherman, 1400 Broadway, New York. He's America's busiest and best tobacconist. If you detected a little smile while I was doing that last word, Bob Sylvester of the Daily News walked in, who writes one of the, if not the best, one of the best columns around, and a very funny bit it is each day, and he just lit a heater, I guess a Nat Sherman heater, that, well, it proves to me that he has extra outside income. No working newspaper man can afford that size cigar.
How true.
He says, how true. Let me meet now Mr. Malcolm X, leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims, who early this morning met at the Hotel Teresa in Harlem with Fidel Castro. You would call that an accurate description of the group and the day's events?
Most inaccurate.
Go ahead. Straighten me out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gray. And I would like to point out that when you refer to us or to me as the leader of the black nationalist Negro group in Harlem, known as the Muslims, I don't think that you could say anything that would be farther from the truth.
I didn't use the word black. I'll read it again. I said leader of the nationalist Negro movement known as the Muslims.
Yes, well, that's worse yet.
Well, that's me. I keep getting my foot in it.
That's right. A Muslim, a nationalist, and I think it should be explained to you the difference between a Muslim and a nationalist. The black nationalists, a Muslim, we're Muslims. And a Muslim is one who believes that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. We're not known as Muslims, we are Muslims. And a nationalist usually is a political group whose objective is the betterment of the black man, but usually they don't stress religion, they don't stress God, nor do they stress moral reformation. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the one whom I represent, is the spiritual head of the fastest growing group of black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. And by Muslims, we mean that we are a religious group. We believe in God. We believe in moral reformation. And as you probably recall, in the Time magazine a year ago in July, they referred to him as one of the greatest moral reformers who has ever appeared among the so-called Negroes, because he has absolutely been successful in eliminating the addiction to dope, to tobacco, to alcohol. We're anti-alcohol, anti-tobacco, anti-dope, anti-adultery, anti-prostitution, anti-stealing, anti-anything that's contrary to the law. So I would like to make that point. We are a religious group of Muslims. We are not, as you would put it, black nationalists.
I didn't say black nationalists.
Well, Negro nationalists. And there's no such thing as a Negro nationalist. A Negro never thinks of his own kind to the extent where he has the spirit of nationalism. When a man begins to refer to himself as a nationalist, he refers to himself as a black man.
Mr. X, that was just what you've just said is just because of my introduction. I'm almost afraid to ask the first question.
Yes, sir, but I mean, I wanted to straighten that out because
we may be here till dawn.
That's correct. But I think it's better to be here until dawn and have the correct opinion of each other than to be misinformed.
I take back the introduction, and you are the leader, the associate leader of what?
I am Mr. Elijah Muhammad's representative or minister to the Muslims in the New York area, a religious group who follows the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Now,
Could I ask a question?
Bob Sylvester, you certainly may if Mr. X doesn't.
I think this is a very kind
But you have to get on mic.
All right.
We don't have booms.
I would like to ask just a very, I hope, a very inoffensive and kind question. I have seen I'm very interested in jazz music, and I've seen so many jazz musicians go to the trend of what they call Islamic. Is that yours?
We who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad abstain from the show world or show business, because usually to participate in that, you're surrounded by alcohol, and you're surrounded by people who are drunk. You're surrounded by people who are out trying to have a good time. It's an environment that can cause a lot of trouble. And when we follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we try to avoid trouble. And one of the best places to stay away from if you want to avoid trouble is nightclubs where people get drunk and usually don't know what they're doing or what they're saying.
And yet every one of the boys that I know that have gone to what they call Islamic do not drink, do not smoke. They do drink coffee, and they're very quiet. Is it the same?
All Muslims are the same. A Muslim is a brother to a Muslim.
I will retire.
No, it's all right, Bob. You made one statement, Mr. X. You said that something about having a good time. Would you just recall that for me a moment ago?
No, you'll have to recall.
You're not against having a good time, are you?
We're not against having a clean good time. See, Mr. Muhammad emphasizes
this
cleanliness.
Is all relevant, I think,
yes,
when you get into the word clean.
Clean, yes. Well, it's a person's... some people have a different conception of clean, but we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad take it for exactly what it means. We try and clean ourselves up physically, morally, spiritually, and otherwise.
Isn't it true that a cafe singer named Roy Hamilton appeared at your Harlem Roundup recently?
Yes, sir.
Well, isn't he a nightclub entertainer?
He sings in the nightclub.
Well, you wouldn't decry his method of earning a living.
We don't decry his method of earning a living. But I say we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to the best that we can avoid any involvement in any environment that's not conducive to good morals. And we have many of our brothers who used to be in show business. After they are in a position economically to leave it, they leave it. As you know yourself, most of our people, most of the so-called Negroes who have become quite famous in show business usually die in poverty. They don't have
That's not because of show business.
No, it's not because of show business. It's because of the system.
What system is that, Mr. X? This is way off our original discussion.
I think we better get to our original discussion.
I'm curious as about the system. What are we talking about now?
Well, sir, you take show business. Take, for instance, they say that Ella Fitzgerald is the queen, but Ella Fitzgerald is still struggling. Struggling economically. Wherein
I'll never know why.
Wherein people who come along and imitate her go beyond her. They get television shows. They go forward. There are no barriers, no obstacles in their path.
You're telling me now that there are barriers because Ella Fitzgerald is a Negro?
Because she's non-white, I would say there are barriers, yes.
Well, how about Harry Belafonte and Sammy Davis and Sidney Poitier?
They're in a category, I'd say that Sammy Davis is in a unique category.
He's a great entertainer. That's why he's unique.
All by himself. He's in a unique category all by himself.
What about Sidney Poitier?
He's in a unique category all by himself, and he's respected somewhat. I should say he's respected, but I think you'll find that many of the so-called Negro musicians or entertainers who have crossed the line marriage-wise, very seldom do you find their audiences remain predominantly so-called Negro. Usually their billings or their dates or their schedules they're more downtown or in white theaters or nightclubs predominantly patronized by whites than among their own kind. For instance, there are some so-called Negro entertainers who, after undertaking a white wife, for instance, you could go all over Harlem and never find one of their records on the Nickelodeon.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, that's not the point. Still, the point is, after they make such moves, it affects them with their own people more so than is commonly realized. Now, that's not dealing in any specific personalities, but I say...
I don't know what this has got to do with our discussion.
Well, you brought it up.
No, you said that the system created a great deal of anguish, I guess is the word, that Ella Fitzgerald wasn't doing so well. The last time I looked, Ella Fitzgerald was the highest paid singer of her kind.
Mr. Gray, that the majority of it, you can always pull out exceptions.
Well, you named Ella Fitzgerald.
No, that's right, but still, you can always pull out exceptions. But the majority of the so-called Negro entertainers, whether it's in the actual field of music or whether it's in the field of sports, like fighting, usually, despite the amount of money that they draw in at the gate, they end up in poverty.
Well, that would be the fault of their economic advisors or their own bad inherent sense of business. You can't blame the system for that.
When the system is responsible for their bad, as you call it, inherent sense of business. The system, the environment under which they grow up, is responsible
Well,
for their bad sense of
let me
business.
tell you about an example that perhaps you do not know, and perhaps I'm telling tales out of school because we are very good friends. But Sidney Poitier is a Negro actor of great stature and very widely respected. And Mr. Poitier, who is in his mid-30s, actually today will never have to work again if he doesn't care to, because he's been so well advised and so well set up in a financial way that literally he will never have to work again if he doesn't wish to.
Yes.
Fortunately, he wishes to.
Yes, well,
So the responsibility of finding proper advisors would seem to be upon the performer. The public can't be blamed, or the show business bookers can't be blamed because someone who earns $5 or $10 or $20,000 a week is not wise enough to entrust it to someone who is honest and gives good advice. And there are hundreds of such people around. All you have to do is find them.
Yes, well, you find them, sir.
Oh, I'd be glad to give you the name of a good business manager.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm not looking for one. I think I have the best business manager in the world, and that's the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, if you want to get to him...
Do you have a statement of net worth with you so we can judge this?
Sir?
No, that's a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the next segment of this discussion, a brief reintroduction. I'm talking with Malcolm X. He is an associate of Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the group known as the Muslims. Is that correct?
He's the leader of the Muslims, in the largest group of black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. They're not known as the Muslims, they are Muslims. Just like you're not known as Barry Gray, you are Barry Gray.
You want to bet? Let's pause here for the news after this important minute in New York and in Buffalo. Ladies and gentlemen, this word from Northwest Airlines.
Listen to the whisper of the Northwest jets whistling through the blue. Listen to the whisper of the DC-8s. They're smooth and fast and quiet too.
Hawaii, one of the world's famous vacation lands, is closer than ever now via Northwest DC-8 jets. Leave in the afternoon, Northwest jets you one stop to Seattle, then straight on to Honolulu, arriving that evening, the same evening. Fly Northwest DC-8 jets, your best choice in super-fast, super-fine service to Hawaii.
Enjoy the Northwest friendliness and service that you get. Give wings to your heart on a Northwest jet, on Northwest Orient Airlines.
And now the news in New York and in Buffalo. Here on WMCA, the news brought to you by the Dandy Mattress Corporation, exclusive manufacturers of the Cairo Spinal Mattress. There were riots in the streets of New York marking the opening of the United Nations Assembly today. In one 3-hour battle outside the UN building, mounted police charged demonstrators. In the evening, demonstrators near the Soviet UN delegation headquarters building hurled firecrackers and eggs at police and their horses. Police fought with fists and clubs to keep the demonstrators at a safe distance from the Soviet building where Premier Khrushchev is staying. Frederick Boland of Ireland has been elected President of the United Nations General Assembly. His victory was considered a defeat for Khrushchev, who backed the candidate from Czechoslovakia. The new United Nations Assembly president was asked if he feels the Assembly can make progress in disarmament in view of its size. Boland remarked on the opportunities the UN offers for private meetings. He said there is machinery there, and it is not insignificant. 14 new nations have been admitted to the UN in colorful ceremonies. All of the nations are African except one, Cyprus. Their admission increases the UN membership to 96 nations. In Washington, Senator John Kennedy said Americans must expect sacrifices to preserve U.S. world leadership against the communist threat. In his first national speech of the presidential campaign, Kennedy struck back at Republican attacks on Democratic criticism of government policy. Kennedy said, "In times such as these, I say it is wrong and dangerous for any American to keep silent about our future if he is not satisfied with what is being done to preserve that future. And we'll have a report on the Nixon activities immediately after this word. If you wake up with a spine that feels like a scenic railway, the reason could be a bad mattress. Now, back miseries can be traced very often to a soft, sagging mattress that gives your body poor support. But there is a mattress that gives real support and helps you get sound, restful sleep. The Dandy Chirospinal Mattress, endorsed by the Chiropractic Association of New York. The give-and-take action of the Dandy Chirospinal Mattress can give you the relaxed, tension-free sleep that's needed for physical and mental well-being all through the day. Now, for a short time only, this amazing chiropractic-endorsed mattress is yours for $79.50. $79.50. The Dandy Chirospinal Mattress now can be seen at Siemens Quality Furniture Company, 4 fine stores in Brooklyn, the Flatbush store at 980 Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. More news. Vice President Nixon has urged all Americans to stand united behind President Eisenhower. He urges avoiding statements which tend to divide and disparage America. He campaigned today in northeastern Pennsylvania and then on a swing through Michigan. From Rome, 5 days of rain along Italy's west coast from the Alps south to Rome have left a known death toll of 50. The area was struck by floods which washed out highways, bridges, and railroad tracks. Helicopters are searching the flooded highways for motorists still trapped, and there's little hope of finding any alive on the roads searched. And the Milford, Delaware Police Chief Robert Downs and his 11-man force have returned to jobs after agreeing to submit their dispute over working hours to arbitration. They want a 48-hour work week slashed to 40 hours. And that's the news. The news on WMCA, brought to you tonight and every night by the Dandy Mattress Corporation, exclusive manufacturers of the Chirospinal Mattress.